questions. Hey, nice to meet you. So any questions you guys have, anything that you want to learn or ask, anything that you want to cover in particular, I'll start with that. If not, I'll just go on some things that I have prepared already. So does anybody have any questions that they want to ask about anything in particular before we begin? Anyone at all? No? Okay, cool.
Maybe later on.
Maybe later on, yeah, cool. Cool, so I suppose I'll start off then. So I wrote down a couple of things here that I will go over. So what I try to teach people when I do teach, I try and teach them how to think as opposed to what to play, because we can all sit and look at hours and hours of YouTube videos anytime we want, but we don't always get to learn about how to think about guitar. So I'm going to break down some of the tunes that I have written already and show you where I got ideas from and kind of where you can steal information from. So for example, I think the first thing I'll probably start with is my tune Avenue. Some of you might know this. This is kind of like my hit, for want of a better word. I'm going to break down the groove in Avenue to show you how I put it together, and I'm going to show you different things that I stole from different people and put it together then as my own. So to break down the groove in Avenue, okay, so I'll play the groove first and then I'll break it down. So the main groove goes like this. That's the main groove behind Avenue. Now I'm going to break it down for you. So the obvious parts are the bass line. Okay. Then we've got the percussive line. So 1, 2, 3, 4. 1, 2, 3, 4. So that's the backbeat, we call it. So the two of those together. Starting to sound pretty groovy already. So now here's hey. So the next part is putting in the chords. Okay. Now this is where the actual magic happens as such. When you play, at least I think, when you play solo acoustic guitar, you want to keep your groove as solid as possible. And at the beginning of a tune in particular, you want to make it really, really obvious to people. So if I'm playing a solo piece or if I'm backing a singer, at the start of the tune, I'll never ever be flashy. I'll never ever, pull out my best licks, or I'll never get really technical. I keep it really simple at the start, because the idea is you want your audience to lock into the groove, then you can start building. If you put an idea in somebody's head, okay, there's the groove will continue in their head without them even realizing it. So later on, what you can do is you can add to that basic groove. So the basic groove in your head right now is. Okay, so that will keep going. So then, putting in the chords on top of it. Okay, there are 2 layers to the chords. Everybody gets the first one, and nobody gets the second one. The first layer is putting in the chords. So the chords I play are just E minor and A7, like that. Okay, but I voice them differently. Now, if you're not familiar with voicings, it literally just means playing the same chord in a different position. Okay, so there's an E minor. Here's another E minor. That's not so common. You might recognize that as a G. It's actually an E minor with the E on top. So that's the first chord. The second chord then I play is an A7, like that. Okay, that's like A, and we've got a G here as well. That's my A7. Okay. So here's the first layer everyone gets. Everyone gets the chords, and they play. Every cover I've seen does this. That is correct, okay? But the actual magic, the actual secret where the groove comes in is in the next part. So these are called ghost notes, okay? So ghost notes are something that I stole from when you watch drummers play, when you watch bass players play. Drummers, when they get really funky, they're not really making those notes very obvious. They're just kind of barely there, filling up the space in the background. And the same if you see a bass player playing. When they're playing slap bass, you'll often hear notes where they're going in between. So you've got a note and then like it's not really a note, it's just an effect. So if you apply that idea to playing guitar, you can add those ghost notes to the groove. So the groove as it is right now with no ghost notes sounds like this. Now with the ghost notes. So you hear the difference there. The second one was a lot more funky and a lot more, it caught your attention more. And the way that I do this, okay, is little simple things, but you have to put them together in the right order. So for example, in that chord that I play, the E minor I showed you, this one, okay, it's a hammer-on before I hit the chord. Like this. So you don't actually hear the hammer-on, all you hear is the you don't really listen for the and again, that's the next part to it. So instead of playing the chords straight, what I'm actually doing is like that, okay? So that is, if you can give it a go if you want. I tend to keep talking, so if you want to stop me at any point, just say stop, and I'll explain.
I love your talking. I think you're very well.
Oh, good, excellent. Yes, I've been practicing my English. So yeah, it's you might know it as a chord of G like that. I might be tuned a little bit higher. Okay, and then so that's just like a little hammer on in the middle. Yeah, just like that.
That's so good though, because yours is tuned differently.
Yeah, I'm definitely a lot higher. Yeah, I'll tune it down. Actually, no, I'll tune it down now.
Was that the airplane or was that just...
Airplane. There we go. Now that should be a bit better. So, yeah, as I said, that's the first one, okay? So it's like a 5th fret, 4th fret, 3rd fret, and then open string like that. But what I'm doing is, I hammer on from the A to the B, so I get a like that. And then the second one is like a normal chord of A here, but the only difference is, so I hit the open B, hammer on the E, and like that. So it goes, like that, okay? So the point again here is not so much that I want you to play this now, but these are little things that you keep in mind when you're putting together your own guitar arrangements, that it's like, okay, if I want to make this more funky, or if I want to make this more interesting, how do I do it? Well, this is one way of doing it. Put in those ghost notes in different places. The other part I do it in the groove is so the other place I do there is that I'm kind of pulling off when I hit the G. Like that. I'm not aiming to go da, 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 da. What I'm trying to do is hear that? That's just a dead note. But that adds to the groove overall. So even though you don't hear the note, you still hear the effect. Okay? So that's one thing that I stole from bass players and drummers, and it's just something you can add in, and it's totally personal taste. There's no right or wrong way to do it. It's just a matter of adding them in where it feels good. And generally, if it feels good, it is good. There's something about music that if it's right, it feels right, and if it's not right, it won't feel right. So it's a good guideline to go by. So that's just one thing that you can add in to arrangements. Another thing that I think is important is that a lot of people forget that no matter what guitar music that you listen to or what guitar player you've heard, the maximum number of notes that we have on a standard guitar is 6. You know, if you're a piano player, most of your standard chords are at least 5 or 6 notes as it is. We have 6 notes in total. So what I like to do is I like to use chords that have a lot of information because it makes the sound of the guitar much bigger than it actually is. So for example, I have, actually, here's a good example. I have a tune called Off Today on my album, and I'll play you a little bit of it, and then I'll break down how I put the chords together. So Off Today sounds like this. They sound really unusual, and the reason is that the chords that I've picked for that song, every note in the chord is different. Okay, and here's where kind of the thinking comes into it. If I wanted, when I wrote that song, I wanted to have it as, my idea at the start was B minor, C sharp minor, C, D. Okay, but I wanted to make it a bit more expressive, so I started. Okay, so B minor 7, C minor 7, C major 7, D major 7, still wasn't doing the job for me. What I decided to do was, I decided to keep going with the extensions of the chord. Now I don't know much music theory, but the one thing I do know is that when you pick notes that go up in intervals of 2, or 3, excuse me, that's when you start getting really interesting chords. So for example, the B minor, I have in my head B minor when I play this chord. The chord is actually B, D, A, C sharp, and E, like that, okay? They're called extended chords. They're really, really common in jazz piano. So generally any jazz piano kind of chords that sound really good, I'll try and work them out on the guitar. But the good point of using these extended chords is that it fills up your guitar sound. So instead of just playing a B minor, you get this really, really kind of big haunting sound. Like that, okay? Yeah.
Because I forgot, an extended chord is you extend with what?
Yeah, so you extend it, that's what I was about to talk about. You extend it, notes going up in intervals of thirds or 3.
Okay.
So when I'm building that chord, let's say for example from B minor, okay, I go B, B, C, D, D, E, F sharp. Oh, sorry, well the F sharp's on the bottom here. I'll explain why I did that in a minute. So B, D, then F sharp, then F sharp, G, A, B, C sharp, C sharp, D, E. And all of a sudden, we've got this big, really luscious chord. Now, you'll notice there that the only exception in the pattern is that the F sharp is on the bottom, okay, when I play that chord. So The reason I do this is because it's really hard to play an F sharp there and still try and play all the rest of the notes. So you'd have your hand like that, okay, which just doesn't work. It's not funky. So what I do instead is I put that F sharp in the bass, so I put it in the bottom, and that fills it up. That's a really modern sound when you're building up a chord. If you take the number 5, so for example I'm in B minor here, B, C, D, F, so F sharp, excuse me. So F sharp is the 5 in the chord. If you put that in the bass, it'll always sound good. The 5 in the bass for any chord, by the way, will sound good. How many times have you heard like that sounds fine, you know, but that doesn't, you know what I mean? So using like a G with a C chord with a G in the bass will always sound good. So that idea of using the 5 in the bass works for any chord. But in particular, when you're using these extended chords, it nearly makes the guitar not sound like a guitar, which is sometimes a really good sound to look for. Because you can tell by the voicings, you can tell by the notes that are being played, that's a B minor, that's a D, whatever, we all know the sound. But when you have that, you kind of go, whoa, what's that? And these are all put together the same way, by the way. So the minor shape is the one I just explained. Okay. Then the major, sorry, another minor. Then there's a major shape, like that, and that's put together exactly the same way. C, D, E, F sharp, or sorry, C, D, E, F, G, A, B, C, D, and then you could put an F sharp on the top, but in this case I put in a G. Like that, okay? I hope, is that too confusing? No? It's a little bit confusing. Yeah, but it's something, once you start practicing it, it becomes very doable. You start thinking differently about how you put chords together. But the main thing is, and the kind of the rule for putting together chords that sound like this, is that you shouldn't have the same note twice in the chord. So when I go through the chord, F sharp, B, D, A, C sharp, E, there's no like B and B, there's no F sharp and F sharp. All the notes are different. And I love chords that sound like that. You know, if you take a chord like, for example, like that's nearly one of those, for example. Okay, you've got A, E, B, C, G. They're all different notes. That's what makes that's the richness in the chord. And what makes it even more interesting is if you can put that information in the bottom of the chord. So what I mean by that is when you get chords that sound like really bass heavy. If anybody here is a fan of like Snarky Puppy, Wolfpack, you know, that kind of stuff, they do this all the time. All of their sounds are really like dense information in the bottom and really airy and bright up at the top. So they play a lot of chords that sound like that, okay? There's so much weird information going on there. But then usually you'll just have the top will be really bright and airy. They leave a lot of space there. So the main point that I'm getting at here is, depending on where you put information in a chord, it can sound totally different. So sometimes, like, Lucky? So sometimes in a song, I will choose to put a lot of information in the bottom, and sometimes I'll put no information, and sometimes I'll put all the information at the top. And that really creates a kind of a different sound for your listener. So I'll give you an example. In my tune Marrakesh, I've got some chords in it that they sound kind of normal at the start, but the more you listen, they're not really that normal. So for example, Marrakesh, the groove goes tune. So I'll break it down little bit by little bit, and I'll show you how I was thinking about it. So at the start, the groove is boom, 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 boom. Real kind of Arabic sounding, you know, in the desert sort of idea. But you'll notice the second chord I play, you've got a G sharp, a C, a D, and a G. So naturally they're kind of, they don't really sound great, but in the context of the chord, they sound kind of, whoa, you know, they sound kind of all right now. And then down to the F. Okay, so that's the first kind of distribution of the tension. Is kind of, it's really, it should make you go feel really strained because there's a G and a G sharp, they don't work together. But because you're using the other notes, it makes it sound a little bit more all right. Do you have a question?
No, I just love what you say. Like, oh yeah.
Oh, okay, cool. That's okay. Chin
With
up
a
is.
G and a G sharp, you know,
Can I ask something?
Yeah.
I wonder, the strong point is your feel, the rhythm.
Mm-hmm.
And then you build it up with chords, but how you can find the melody? It's complex, you have rhythm,
Yeah.
you have harmony,
Yeah.
and how you put the melody
Melody on top.
You find it by the way of playing? Or how do you
Usually,
do
it depends on how I write the tune. You see, I grew up playing Irish music, and in Irish music, there's only melody and rhythm. There's no harmony at all. We don't like harmony in Irish music. So you just play the tune, and that's it. And you play it the same way each time, and there's no improvisation, and there's no room for creativity. You just play it, and that's it. That's like the way I learned the real kind of the hardcore traditional way, as we call it. Now with modern Irish music, it's very different. There's lots of harmony and lots of changes. For me, when I'm writing a tune, kind of what I try to do to write a melody is, as opposed to finding it on the guitar, I try and sing something over it. So, for example, with that tune, with Marrakesh, that started out as a very slow idea. So when I was initially kind of messing, I was kind of something like that, you know. And then one day, like I started singing like just kind of joking, imagining the call to prayer that they do, thinking about what they sing at that time. So something like that. So then I go looking for that on the guitar. So I know what I want my groove to sound like. So that you kind of put that to one side and then think, okay, so my melody, I'm just going to sing something on top of this. This is what I do. I sing it into my phone, into my voice memos in my iPhone, and I play it back. Then I listen and I work out how to play it. So then I have the two ideas. I have, okay, well, this is what I want my melody to be, and this is my groove. Now, how do I marry them together? It's nearly like trying to write the music and then trying to do a guitar arrangement of the music. So that's the way I look for it. So all the stuff I've been talking about up to now, about, you know, choosing what chords and where to put all the tensions and that kind of thing, that stuff all comes later. The most important thing is always writing the music, writing what you want it to sound like. And ideally, you know, if you took away all the complex chords and all of the guitar tricks and dynamics and things, if it still sounds good with just you going, well then you've written a good song. So then you can always build on that. So if the basic idea for something is good, then you start building in blocks. So for me, I'll always start with a really, really basic version, and then I build up and say, okay, well, what other chord inversions can I put in? How can I put in extra harmony? Can I put in a different rhythm? Can I put in whatever? And I build it up that way, like building a house. So so that's the way I do it. I do them both separately, and then I try to marry them together.
Yes.
Yeah, I think that's, for me, it's the only way to do it.
There's no rule.
Yeah, no rule. I mean,
Everybody can find it.
Exactly, yeah, and some people write the music on the guitar, and that's fine. If it sounds good, that's fine. For me, I don't like writing music on the guitar. I prefer singing an idea and singing chord changes and singing. Literally, if I took out my phone and you went through my voice memos, you'd think I was crazy, because it's just me usually going all this kind of stuff. And that's the way I write the music, because for me, when I was growing up, I played the concertina. I played a little Irish instrument. It's a little bit like an accordion. that's what I played. So when I began to understand music more than just playing it, I wasn't thinking, I couldn't even play the guitar. So I was thinking about music in my head, so I continue to think that way. So when I'm writing music now, I write it away from the guitar. I write it with my voice, and I try to learn it again later. And then I bring it back to the guitar. So when I have my tune written, or when I have an idea, and I said, okay, well here's my idea, and I sang it into my phone, so now I'm going to listen to it, okay, now, how do I play it? And that's when the guitar starts for me. So it's always afterwards. I write music, and then I bring it onto the guitar. So that's another one of my main tips for people. When you write music on the guitar, when you come up with ideas, your hands want to do what they already know how to do. You know, if you know a lick up here, you're going to want to put that into everything because you know how to do it. But if you come up with an idea and you say, okay, well I want to play this, how do I play it? The best thing to do is to have a copy of it first. Have your idea somewhere else that's not on a guitar, and then say, okay, I want it to sound like this, does it sound like this? And then you have a reference point. So then it's your job to go and find the sound that you want on the guitar. But that's how I think about putting it together.
And how about the form of the song?
Form of the song, I usually just feel that. I feel it, yeah. I try, personally, I prefer when tunes are short rather than long. It's just a preference I have. I think growing up with Irish music, every tune, first part twice, second part twice, first part twice, second part twice, done. So every tune lasts about, 70 seconds maximum, and then you're done forever. So I think it's just the way I grew up. I love short pieces of music that change a lot. That's the way I hear things. I know other musicians love tunes that go on for like 7 or 8 minutes, guitar solos and then like a bass solo and stuff. That's not, I didn't grow up listening to music that way, so I think I feel it very differently. But for me, the form of the song when I'm writing it it's totally dictated by if I think it should keep moving or if I think it should stay where it is. It's totally a personal thing. Some of the most famous Irish tunes by Planksty and the Chieftains and stuff like that, there's no form. It just keeps changing. It just keeps going and going and going, and it never comes back to A or B. It just keeps evolving. So that can be cool too, but it's totally preference.
Good folk tunes.
And what's that?
Good folk
tunes. Yeah, exactly. Yeah. So yeah, do you have a question?
Yeah, when you're done.
Yeah, I'm done. Yeah.
You mentioned the groove, that's
Yeah.
the most important thing. What did you do to get your groove really solid?
To get it solid.
Or is it just,
I think part of me I learned a lot of rhythm when I was younger. So in Irish music we have either 4/4, which is a reel, we have 6/8, which is a jig, we have 9/8, which is a hornpipe, or I think 6/8 can be a fast slip jig as well. There's a lot of different kind of strange timings in Irish music. So from when I was young, I was learning kind of not just, but I was learning 1 to 2, 1 to 2, 1 to 2, that kind of rhythm as well, the tunes. So when I was learning how to play guitar for the first time, I was trying to figure out all the Irish tunes that I had learned on the guitar, and that's how I learned to play guitar. I had no teacher. YouTube wasn't really a big thing. So when I learned to play by picking out my you get the feel for it there, that kind of Irish stuff. That's how I worked out where chords were and where, like, okay, well this tune is in E minor, so I can play this note and that note and that note. That's how I learned how to play guitar that way. So I think that rhythm is something for me. I learned it in a very natural way. The groove then, as you were talking about it, that's something that kind of comes from, it's literally practice. It's literally deciding kind of, if you had drums in a song, what would they sound like? So for me, unfortunately, on the guitar, we're a little bit limited when it comes to rhythm, or dynamics, I should say, because all we really have as a backbeat is that kind of sound. We don't have cymbals, and we don't have, other things we can play on the guitar. We have percussion on the body of the guitar, but that's not always possible to do when we're playing on the strings. So the only one that we kind of can consistently rely on is the right-handed, that kind of thing. So ideally, the way I think about it when I'm putting kind of something solid like that together is that I'll always have a bass note, bass note, bass note, bass note, or I'll keep the pattern consistent. So if I come in early, it'll sound like bass note, and back in like that. So bass note, bass note, bass note, very bass note, bass note, very bass note, like that. I keep the pattern the same the whole way through. So it's the idea is that, as I was saying earlier with Avenue, with that the pattern of the groove is the same the whole way through. So that's what we sit into. If the pattern is the same each time it comes around, then your brain locks into that automatically. So you think, okay, well, I'm expecting this here. Even if you don't realize you're expecting it, your ears are expecting it to happen. So I think that's important when you're practicing. If you slow it down and say bass note, off the beat bass note, off the beat bass note, or whatever way it comes, whatever way your song is going, as long as you keep the pattern the same, it'll always sound really, really groovy. So I think that's the way to lock into a groove if you want it to sound really strong and punchy. The other thing that makes a huge difference, by the way, is the way I hold my hand, my right hand on the guitar. It might be a little bit different to what you're seeing before now. If you follow the likes of Tommy Emmanuel, Chet Atkins, they all hold their hands in a way where they put their pinky down and they have a very kind of clean attack with their fingers, and they have the thumb pick pretty much kind of there on their thumb, so kind of just in the middle of your thumb a little bit, and they get a very, very clean attack. So the clean attack is like that's the clean sound. But for me, what I do with the thumb pick, I bring it down just a little bit more, like that, so most of my nail is over it. And then what I do is, I hold my hand here, and I pick upwards from the strings, like that. So when I'm playing a lot of the time, my hand position is very, very different. If I was playing the other way, it would sound like this. Control. It sounds more like a classical guitar player. That's not what I want. I want to be able to pull the strings and get that like slap bass sound, and I want to be able to get that attack out of the strings. So ideally, what I do with my right hand is I pull up from the guitar. Now what this means is I have to change my EQ a lot. My EQ is like bass nearly full, treble nearly full. So it gives me that really sharp sound. And my mid-range, by the way, is turned like, my mid-range is at 25%, there's nearly none. Like that, so it gives that real pull sound. And where I got that from was listening to James Taylor playing the guitar. When I started playing guitar, I listened to James Taylor a lot, and James Taylor plays this way. So if you ever hear his hand tucked in that way, and he plays like that, like a claw. Or the other person that played that way was Jerry Reed, he played that way as well. So that's where that sound comes from. If you play one of my tunes with the kind of the Tommy Emmanuel style, the correct way, if you want, of playing the guitar, it'll sound very clean and it'll sound good, but the problem is it doesn't have the attack, it doesn't have the bite in it. So when you play one of my tunes, or something by Jerry Reed, for example, I think it's much better to flip your hand position to play with that extra attack. And ideally, if you can do both, that means you have a lot of control with your right hand about how you want the music to sound. So that's like when I teach people, usually if I'm doing like a Skype lesson or if I'm doing like a one-on-one thing, that's the first thing I usually show people how to do, is if you hold your hand differently, you'll get a different tone from the guitar. And even though it's not as warm, you get a lot of punch and a lot of attack from it. So it's just something to be conscious of. Again, going back to what I said at the start, this is more about starting to think differently about how to attack the guitar rather than like teaching you how to play licks or how to play tunes or whatever. But it's definitely part of it. It's something to be conscious of. Yeah, any questions on anything so far? Am I confusing anybody? No? All good? Cool, excellent. So yeah, other things that I've picked up along the way. So yeah, what you were saying about the groove earlier, about keeping things consistent. Sometimes you need to almost invent new chord shapes to suit what you're playing. If you write music away from the guitar, as I was saying earlier, you want to stay true to the music, and you don't want to stay true to kind of the limitations of the guitar. So I'm going to give you an example of that. There's a slow piece on my album, and it's called Kora Mantra, okay? And the bass line goes like this. I'm going to play this with something, so. That the chords I played in the middle were a really big stretch in my hand. So when I'm playing that, and then the next chord, so where those chords come from, it's not that I know all these chords inversions and I want to pick nice ones. The idea behind writing the song was that I would go da da ba 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 like that. The other thing I wanted to do was I wanted to have boom 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 boom. Like that. This ties into what I said about putting all the information in the bottom of the chord. You see here I've got D, F sharp, and I've got C. So I've got D, which is number 1 of the chord. I've got F sharp, which is number 3, and then I've got C, which is number 7. Okay, so that's the 3 and 7 hold a lot of information in that chord. And the other thing I wanted was, so I found a chord here that let me do both. And then, and this one's even harder. I wanted that major 7. So, now I'm lucky I've got big hands, so I can do this easily. Unfortunately, if you've got small hands, there's no way around it. You just have to deal with what you have. I'm lucky that I have big hands, but the thing is your hands will stretch if you practice. If you want to play a specific chord or a specific thing, your hands will stretch. If you've ever seen Andy McKee play the guitar, he's got like the shortest, fattest fingers, but he can stretch like that. He can stretch like all the way down the guitar because his hands have stretched to be able to do that. So if you find that you're not making a stretch, do it slowly over time, but don't hurt your hand. If you hurt your hand doing it, it'll only do you damage. So keep trying a stretch until you get it, and your hands will adapt to it, but sometimes it takes a little bit of time. And another thing I should mention, just while I think of it, is that, and I was doing this on the plane earlier, before I start playing, if I'm in a hurry and I want to play and I need to warm up, what I do is, I do a simple hand exercise. I'm going to show it just on the left hand for now. What I do is I get every finger, pull it back, like I keep my arm straight, I pull my finger back for about 5 seconds on each finger, like that. So I keep pulling them back there, and just until you feel a burn, and you should feel the burn kind of here-ish and here-ish just a little bit, like that. I do the same, I do the opposite. I go underneath the fingers for about 5 seconds each. I'm doing this a lot quicker than normal here. So I go through every finger like that. Then I get all of them, pull them back, underneath like that, so that's just the fingers. I do the same with my thumb. I'll stretch my thumb as many ways as I can, that way. And then the other two things that make a big difference, okay? I get my hand and I go like that. I literally try and make it as big as I can for about 5 to 10 seconds, like that, okay? That starts getting the blood coming into your hands. The other thing to do is to massage the blood up from the bottom of the hand into your fingers. So if you're ever stuck for time and you want to warm up quickly but you don't have your guitar, and you don't have it, like even already I can feel a difference between my left and my right hand after doing that. And then massaging the blood from the bottom kind of into your fingers. That's, for me, it's a quick way to warm up my hands if I haven't played. Now unfortunately there's no substitute for just sitting down, playing, and playing slowly, kind of getting your hands into shape. That's the best way. But usually for me, a couple of those as well, kind of to get the blood going through your fingers. For me, if I'm stuck, and I'm like before I was here today, I was doing that in the apartment, and I was doing it on the plane, and I did it as I was sitting here as well. It just gets your hands warmed up if you don't get a chance to play. So it's a good thing to do. The more blood you can get into your hands, the better. I remember watching a video of James Taylor before he went on the stage, and he does a handstand before every concert because the blood goes down. So the blood goes into his hands, so then he feels ready to play. So the idea is that the more blood you can get into your hands to keep them warm and to keep them active, the quicker you'll be able to get into the groove of playing. And that brings me on to my next point, which is that when you start playing, like when you start picking up the guitar for the first time, you know, in the morning or whenever you start playing, or if it's before a gig, the best thing to do to get yourself in the mind frame for a gig is not to play anything too fast or too complex. The best thing to do is to play something that A, that you're comfortable with, and B, that grooves really well. So for me, for example, if I pick up a guitar and I just want to kind of get into the flow of a gig, if I'm like 10, 15 minutes before I'm going to go on stage, what am I doing? I'm not going, I'm not doing any of that. What I'm doing is usually something like, because more importantly than getting your hands going, it's getting your brain and it's getting your soul going, it's getting you moving. Because ideally when you play guitar, and this doesn't matter if you're on stage, if you're at home, it doesn't matter where you are, the more you get into the music at the start, you know, the more of a chance you give yourself to feel the music, the better you'll play. And that's just, it's the way humans are. When we feel good and when we feel relaxed, we play our best. So before I go on the stage, I'm not doing any warm-ups, I'm not doing any, you know, I'm not trying to get as quick as I can or anything. I'm playing stuff that I just want to kind of sit into. And if you start moving along with the music, you're doing it right. It's as simple as that. It's a simple rule of thumb. If you start feeling, yes, I'm getting into this is feeling good, your warm-up is done, it's time to go and play. So, I mean, that's what I do right before, like even tonight, probably if I can, I don't know what way the setup is upstairs, but if I can, before I go on tonight, I'm just going to be sitting. Throwing in little things like that for me, now this is probably, it's easy for me to say this because I'm familiar with it, but for me, the other thing that really gets me going is if I take a chord progression or a tune that I know already, and I try to play with it and put in like an extra chord, or if I put in like a rhythm change, or if I put in something that I think is cool into a song, that's something that gets me interested as well. Literally, I mean playing with music, messing around, not practicing it the way you know it, playing with the song and kind of seeing what you can come up with, for me is a good way to get me going, oh, that sounds good, I want to work on this later. It puts you in good form and it makes you want to play better, it makes you want to play full stop. So that's another piece of advice. That's probably, it's easy to say that. I know it's not so easy when you pick up a guitar and go, I have to practice, I have a gig. But trust me, if you play music you enjoy and things that you really identify with and feel good with, you'll always want to play. What else have I got on my list here? So I went through the hand technique. Yeah, another thing as well, I'll talk about guitar arrangements in just a minute, but one thing that I try to do every day, now I didn't get to do it today because I had to drive to the airport, but every day I swim, I go swimming. And the reason I do this is because it frees up my arm, my hand, my fingers, it stretches all my tendons. So yesterday I went swimming for an hour, the day before that I went swimming for an hour. It's really good. Now I don't do it for fitness, so it's not like I'm trying to be Michael Phelps, I'm not trying to be like, you know, up and down the pool. I'm trying to do it, I do it gently, and the reason is it stretches out all of my tendons, and it stretches out like everything up along there gets a workout, as well as the rest of your body. It's the best exercise you can do as a musician. Going to the gym doesn't suit me, because you see me already, I'm inside and I'm sweating. So going to the gym like on machines doesn't suit me, rowing, yeah, exactly, you know. That doesn't suit me at all. So swimming for me is much better. But also, and more importantly, looking after your arms and your fingers and your tendons. You know, if you damage them and you want to be a musician, you know, you can end your career very quickly by damaging tendons, muscles, getting repetitive strain injury. All that kind of stuff is like a career-ending injury, I suppose. So the best thing to do to combat that, rather than to like do specific warm-ups or change your technique or whatever, if you completely stretch your hand every day, you shouldn't get any issues. And I don't get any issues with my hands. And I put it purely down to swimming every day. I know there are other guitar players who like, they study correct technique and you know they play in the classical position, which is much better for your hand than playing it this way. But for me, my idea is that if I try and combat all of the crouching that I'm doing here, I mean, if you look at the position that I'm even sitting in right now, I'm crouched over the guitar, that's not good for your back. And, you know, this isn't good for your arms. So if you want to combat that, the best thing I can recommend you to do is to start swimming. So you probably didn't expect to hear that in a guitar workshop, but there you go.
What about sitting, just sitting like relaxed straight up?
What's that, sorry?
What about just sitting straight up and relaxed?
If you can do that, great. I don't, because the way I learned was like this, and
People are like
yeah,
this.
or like that, or slouched or whatever. Like my posture would, I'd be kicked out of classical guitar. But for me, what gets me around that is by me loosening up my body. You know? Yeah, or yoga as well. I mean, I don't ascribe to the very, you know, the kind of the, for want of a better word, the hippie side of yoga. I'm not into that, but I do like yoga for stretching your body. So I do it every now and again, but I think for me swimming works a lot better. So that's just some advice from my end. Another thing I wanted to talk about as well was doing guitar arrangements. That's something that I get asked about a lot. I have a lot of different guitar arrangements that I've done. And I usually get asked a lot about how I put them together and what I'm thinking about when I'm doing the guitar arrangements. So the kind of the rules that I would have for putting together an arrangement is, number one, do you recognize it straight away when you hear it? If you don't hear it like in the first 5 seconds, that's that song, I know it. It's not really worth arranging. The other thing with the guitar is that unfortunately a lot of pop songs and a lot of popular songs now, they revolve around a set of like 3 or 4 chords. You know, it's like that whole 4-chord thing, like, and over and over and over, like the Ed Sheeran syndrome. You know, all the Ed Sheeran songs follow the same chord patterns. Unfortunately, chord patterns that are limited like that are not good for the guitar. Okay, because as I was saying earlier, we're limited to a certain sound, and we're also limited to a certain sound range. So for example, you have a bass or a piano or something, you can get really low notes to really high notes. If you have a flute or a piccolo, you only get high notes. If you have a bassoon, you get low notes. The guitar is bang in the middle, okay? And so we only have, no matter what we play, we have from here to work from. But our ears hear all this other frequency range as well. So what I try to be conscious of as well in my live shows, as well as in my arrangements, is that if you hit somebody with all the frequencies of the guitar from the start, it becomes boring so quickly. Music, like real percussive music, all this like this kind of stuff, to me, the reason that becomes boring really quickly is because all the frequencies that you can get with a guitar, you're playing them straight away. So then where do you go? If you give everybody, as we say, like if you give somebody the kitchen sink, you know, literally everything, if you give them 100% from the start, the only way to go from 100% is down. Okay? So what I try to do is I try to build it up. What I said earlier about keeping the groove solid, that's usually start at 50, 60, 70%, whatever, and keep it solid, keep it there, go over and under if you need to, but never start off by like hammering on the guitar and giving it like 100%. For me, it's much more fulfilling to hear a guitar arrangement start and then develop a little bit. So for example, I did an arrangement of a Beyonce tune called Love on Top. Okay, and when I start off playing, it goes just even that much of it alone. At the very start in the guitar arrangement, I kept it as simple as possible. There were no extra bass notes. It was just the chords and the backbeat. So this is where I start changing it up. So already I'm kind of starting there, and then I'm making it a little bit more funky. So so we've started in the low range of the guitar down here. All of a sudden we've moved like that. So already you've covered a good bit of the guitar, but you're jumping between the different frequencies of the guitar. So the idea behind any good guitar arrangement is that we keep moving the frequency range. We keep moving. If we've got a bass line going or chords going or something like that, you'll always see in a good guitar arrangement there will be movement in it. So it doesn't matter if it's chords or melody notes or whatever, we have to keep moving on the guitar, because staying in the same frequency range sounds really, really boring. Okay, there are so many guitar players on YouTube that put up like pop songs or songs from movies or songs from TV shows or whatever. And the problem is a lot of music, the melody kind of stays like this isn't the song, it's just, that's what all that stuff sounds like to me. When you stay in the same place, the melody doesn't really move a huge amount. If you look at any good songs from the 1980s, 1990s, even the modern day, there's always movement in music, and it should be the same with the guitar arrangement. So to continue on that Beyonce thing that I showed you, at the start it's kind of mainly down here. Just to give you an idea there, the first part, I kind of played down here in the low register of the guitar. The second part, I was kind of up here, getting into the kind of the baritone range of the, or the kind of the tenor range of the guitar. And then all of a sudden I was up here, up like that. The arrangement keeps moving. So not only am I staying true to the melody in the song and to the chord kind of changes, I'm also trying to cover ground on the guitar. I'm trying to hit you at different frequency ranges at different times. So you get used to hearing that kind of low groove, and all of a sudden it's... So we've got a whole new frequency range, and you kind of go, whoa, this is moving somewhere.
It's not like you're moving up to you're transposing.
No, it's not transposing, it's the same. And the important thing, I'm happy you said about voicing, because the other important thing to do with the guitar arrangement, as well as staying true to the melody, is that you want, if you have a G major 7 down here that you're playing, you want to make sure that when that G major 7 comes around again, but you're up the neck, that you're still playing a G major 7. The easy way out of doing a guitar arrangement is sticking to basic chords and trying to fit in a basic chord again up here. What you want to do is you want to find your G major 7. There are all your G major 7s on the guitar. The way that I don't really use it a huge amount anymore, but the way that I kind of initially found chords was using a thing called a caged system. Have you ever heard of that CAGED system? Most people teach it totally wrong for whatever reason. It's just literally 5 shapes that continue in a pattern. But you can expand on that system to find all the voicings up in different parts of the neck. So what I mean by that is, when most people explain caged, they just say, oh, you can play a C here, and then as an A shape, and then as a G shape, and then as an E shape, and then as a D shape. Well, that's great, but I'm not going to play that ever. You know, the important thing again is to use it to think about finding different chords. So if I want to find a G major 7, but I want to find it in a different part of the neck, you take the shape from down here, and you say, okay, well, how do I play C major 7? There's C major 7. Okay, there's a G major 7. Or if I say, okay, well, there's an A major 7, so this is a G major 7. Or if I say, all right, here's E major 7. Or like this. You could play it like that, or you could play it like that as well. There's loads of different choices. So yeah, there's that's kind of initially, if I was looking for a chord voicing, that's how I would find it. I would find the kind of the basic version down here, and then bring it all the way up the neck, and find the chord voicing up here. And I think it's really important, particularly in songs that have a lot of information in the chords. It's really important to stay true to the chords. So rather than just taking the lazy way out and saying, okay, well, I'm just going to play G. I know it's a G major 9, but I couldn't be bothered to find a G major 9, so I'm just going to find a G instead. That's the wrong way to do it. If you want to find G major 9, there it is, or no, there it is down here, or you know, there it is as well. And so that's, using that cage system is kind of at least a good place to start for looking for those voicings. But I mean, putting together an arrangement takes so much in terms of trying to keep the bass line in, trying to keep the melody line original, and that people will recognize it. And as well as that, trying to keep the groove solid as well. It's a tough thing to do, but at least that's kind of how I approach guitar arrangements. So I hope that insight is helpful.
We have maximum 10 minutes left, I'm just saying.
10 minutes, yeah, perfect. Well, that's good. So that's kind of...
Questions, maybe?
Yeah, any questions that anybody wants, or anybody, did you want to go back over anything? Was I unclear about anything, or did I talk too much? Yeah, I'm just going to get my glass of water. I left it back there. Is there anything else that I was... Oh yeah, there's one more thing that I'll show you that's, I think, useful. Most people, when they start improvising on the guitar, they don't know where to go. So I'm going to show you something, kind of a cheat to get out of improvising if you're not sure or if you get lost. So let's say you're playing a blues, okay? And let's just take a blues in G, for example, okay? And we're playing... it's like, oh no, where'd my solo go? That happens, I hear that happens so much to guitar players that they don't know where they're going to go. So if that ever happens, if you're taking a solo and all of a sudden you're like, where do I go? I'm totally lost. The one thing that will always save you, 100% of the time, is playing octaves on the guitar. They always sound good, and you can think about them much easier than trying to think around the solo. When I started out taking solos, I didn't know where I was going. And to be honest, still it happens to me that I'm in the middle of a solo, I'm kind of like, where do I go here? So if you want to take a guitar solo or a guitar break or something like that, and you find yourself in a corner, if you find, okay, I've played my like, where do I go from here? If you switch to octaves, it'll always sound good. So what I mean by that is you can save your solo by going where am I going then? And all of a sudden your solo is saved. Okay, now it sounds good again. So this is just, it's a simple thing, but I've never seen anybody kind of explain that you can do that with a guitar. It's a really simple thing to do, but it's a good way to start A, improvising, and B, to get yourself out of a corner. You know, chances are, you know, I'm 70% sure you'll probably see it when I play at some point tonight, that at some point I'm going to go, and all of a sudden you'll hear. By just going straight into playing in octaves. Okay, because all you have to think about is a note here. So you say, okay, like that. And you've saved yourself. So it's a good way to start if you're unsure about how to like take a solo, or how to, you know, if you get lost, or if you're in a corner, you're like, where do I go from here? Go to octaves, because you just have to think about one note and it'll sound good because you're just backing it up. Okay, so that's another tip, I suppose, that I can give you. So yeah, is anybody else have any questions or anything?
You're not using your mic.
Sorry?
You're not using your mic.
Yeah.
Where's your feedback?
Sorry?
Where's your feedback?
Oh, in a room like this, I don't need it.
Oh.
If I have a PA, I need it. In a room like this, I don't. It's only really if I have a big sound system and there's way more volume than that, then I'll put the feedback buster in and I'll stop it. But no, the mic is just there and very much on. But like in a room like this, with kind of a small amp and just a small crowd, you don't need the feedback. And I suppose one other thing I mentioned before I finish as well is that I get a lot of people who kind of either message me or ask me about what gear I use, like what strings, what picks, all that kind of stuff. None of that matters. Strings, I get whatever's in the shop. The important part is to keep changing strings all the time. What I mean by that is, if you're using a brand, let's say like Diodario strings, okay, the next time you change strings, use something different. Use Martins, use an Ernie Ball, something like that. The idea behind this is that every set of strings has a different tension. There's a different amount of kilograms on the body of the guitar. So they're pulling slightly differently on the guitar. The idea is that if you change the weight of the string, so if you switch to like Ernie Ball or Martin or whatever, there might be a difference of 2 or 3 kilos. But if you think about how that affects the wood, it pulls the wood in different ways. If you keep using the same strings, the tension will be on the wood in the same place, and the wood kind of sets in that way. It kind of gets used to the string. So sometimes you'll put a new set of strings on the guitar and go, you know something, they're new strings, but it still doesn't sound alive. Change your brand of string, because what that does is that the weight that's now on the soundboard is pulling the wood in different places. So it opens up some of the wood that is closed So you think that by playing the guitar you have all of the wood open, but that's not true. You have certain vibrations going, you know, if you put a load of sand, very fine sand on my guitar, and sent a vibration through it, you would start to see little lines coming out of where the sound is traveling. So by changing the strings on the guitar, the type of string, you have different, kind of a different kilogram level. And then if you put the sand back on the guitar and put a wave, like a signal through it, the lines would be in different places. And the reason is the guitar resonates differently. So in order to kind of keep that effect going all the time, to get the guitar sounding as good as I can, every time I change strings, I use a different brand of string. So right now there are Diodario 12s on it. The next time, I think in my bag, I've got Martin 12s for the gig tonight. And then if I'm changing the strings again tomorrow or the next day, I'll use like an Ernie Ball or John Pierce or whatever I can get. Sometimes I just buy strings just because they're different. The key thing is, I think, plugged in, I don't hear the difference as much as when it's plugged out. Plugged out, you'll always hear a bit more of a difference. But plugged in through a pickup system with that much EQ and reverb, you don't really hear it. So that's kind of the last bit of wisdom or advice. Any other kind of questions or any other things you want to talk about before I finish?
Yes, we're all good.
What's that?
Yes, we're all good.
All good? Everyone happy?
Thank you, Shane.
Good. Oh, yeah. I hope I didn't melt your brain.
No, but you have a lot to think about, really.
Yeah, good. That's exactly what I want. Good.
Very interesting. I really interested. So tonight there's the concert with you.
Ja.
Of ja.
En dat is ook gewoon youth daar.
Daarboven in
Daar waar we vanuit
waar
gaan.
iedereen, ja.
Oké.
Okay, so thank you very much. We're going to do the sound check now.
Great.
Yeah.
Fantastic.
En de auto opzetten?
Usually when I start talking, people start going. Yeah, I think it's a problem of being, when you teach yourself, because you have never been taught, you have never had a teacher to explain things. I never learned things by listening, by listening to somebody speak. I listened because I learned how to play, so when I go to explain, I'm kind of like, are people understanding me?
Well, I think it's very, very
Oh, good, thank you so much. Good, great, excellent.
Ja, ook aan je. Hey Bart, leuk man, je weet het. Ik herken je eerst niet. Ja. Dat hoorde ik vast niet.
En hoe lang ga je naar het...
Nee, het aantal is voor mij op het moment niet te doen. Nee, ik ben al een tijdje werkloos, dus ik vind dat heel erg verrijkend voor mij.
That's the one to me that feels
We organiseren samen
large
met de
feels like
Leeuwen.
it falls.
In de venue in Utrecht. En wat er zo uitziet.
Oh, as many as I can. I usually
Ja, echt heel met thuis
maybe
gespeeld.
like 2 hours playing a gig as well.
Leuk om te zien.
Nee, nog niet.
We do, yeah.
Samen met een Amsterdamse jazzgitarist.
What's the
Hier zit alle
informatie.